All right, welcome back to Technical Writing. I'm Professor Ellis. I'm leading our class, as you know. Um, just wanted to start things off today by just asking how's everybody doing. It's one of the challenging parts of an asynchronous class like we have is that I'm not able to interact uh, maybe as easily as we could normally in an in-person class. But that doesn't mean that I'm not concerned about all of your well-being. Um, Not just in terms of your ability to perform in my class and your other classes, but just generally how you're doing in your life and work and your everything else. So I do just want to encourage everybody to keep in mind that you need to engage in self-care. You need to make sure that you're looking after yourself, look after those that are close to you, and if anything comes up during the semester that's in any way going to impact your ability to learn and do the things that we're doing together as a class, make sure you reach out to me. Whether it be to my office hours on Wednesdays from 3 until 5 on Google Hangouts, which I always post a link to our Open Lab site beforehand, so you can always navigate to our Open Lab site. Scroll down, you'll find the weekly office hours post, click the link, and that'll take you over to where I'm at. And if that time on Wednesdays 3 to 5 doesn't work for you, remember, all you got to do is send me an email letting me know what your availability is like for the next week or so. Just like what times you're available. That way I can try to find the time in my schedule, because I got lots of meetings and other responsibilities where our availabilities overlap. And then I'll get back in touch with you with a link to a Google Hangout. Or if that doesn't work, there's other ways that we can get in touch with one another. But I just want to put that out there to make sure that everybody knows, like, this isn't, um, you know, just a talking head in front of you that doesn't care about, like, you guys as students and as human beings, because I honestly do, and I want to convey that as much as I can, through the video camera, through YouTube, through our Open Lab site, through the emails that I have with you all, that there's no difference between this and our in-person meetings. It's just that we're engaging through a different technologized medium than we would normally be able to as we would meet face-to-face in the classroom. So in today's lecture, I want to try to keep this as short as I can, because I want to give you all as much time to do the task that I'm setting you to do this week. There's a lot that you need to get done to move the first major project forward, and that work that you do as part of the 500-word summary project will be considered your weekly writing assignment. And so I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But first off, I just want to talk about a little bit of housekeeping stuff and talk about just a quick review of, like, where to do research for the assignment, and, like, why we're using some of these research tools. And then the bulk of what I have to talk about will be the 500-word summary next steps, which will constitute this week's weekly writing assignment. So first off, here I am at our Open Lab site. I want to say great job, everybody. We now have everybody join the Open Lab course, so you're all a part of this now. And so I have access to all of your City Tech emails that you registered with, and that's going to be important for what I talk about with this week's weekly writing assignment, which is going to help you on your 500-word summary, because we're going to use those emails, and use email in particular as the medium that we use to communicate. And one thing that I'll point out in regarding that is that you'll find in our class that I like to use a number of different online writing tools, publishing tools, communication tools, because in the real world, you're not going to have just a single platform where you do all of the work that you do in the workplace. And I know that I've heard from a lot of students that they prefer using Blackboard just simply because everything is all in one place. It's like the Swiss Army knife of online teaching. But there's several like problems with that. Is one, while it does enable you to get your work done all in one place, it's not really mirroring what your experience is going to be like in the workplace. And I want our class, just as much as I'm asking you all to pick topics that you can learn from for all of your projects. So like not only are you doing the technical writing work, but you're expanding your knowledge. And so that knowledge that you gain, you're going to be able to leverage when you're in job interviews, when you're talking shop with people, maybe finding new leads or new ways forward in your work, in your career. But I think more importantly, we need to think about how this class models workplace practices. Now, if we were holding this class face to face, one of the words that you would hear me use to describe our class is that it uses a lot of studio time. So normally when I teach this class in person, the way that it works is that I would give a short lecture at the beginning like this, and then the rest of class time would be students sitting in front of their computers doing the writing assignments, whether it be the weekly writing assignment or working on a major project for the class. And then I would be there to go around, answer questions, help people out, maybe writing emails back to students while everyone else is working. This is something we call modeling. I'm not just going to sit there on my phone like playing Flappy Bird. I'm going to be using that time to do things similar to what I would want you all to be doing, which is doing different kinds of reading and writing tasks. So that's something that we kind of get lost with the online instruction of this class. But one way that we can bring it back into workplace practice is to use a variety of different tools and see how we can use those tools in different ways to get the work done that needs to get done. And so none of the things that I'm going to show you in our class, when we're using Open Lab, which again is something based on WordPress, 1/3 of the internet runs on WordPress. I mean, this is a core, foundational, industry recognized technology that we're using for like our back and forth communication, for broadcasting from me to you, and then also for you posting some of your work, which you've already done in our last week's weekly writing assignment, which I see a lot of folks are getting their work in really great. And as I said before, if you need a little extra time, now that we're just getting started, I understand that. Once we get in a groove, though, we want to try to be better about hitting deadlines. But at least for right now, I'm understanding and want to give everybody a little bit extra breathing room so that nobody gets like too frustrated and gets too far behind. So I think it's really great that folks are getting their work in, but you do have some time to get that in. But as you'll see in today's weekly writing assignment, why it's important to be able to keep up with the work, because what you'll find is that others become dependent on you producing something before they can do their work, which is you're common in the workplace, not just in technical writing, but in any of the work that you're going to be doing. So getting back to this idea of tools, we're going to be using a variety of different tools. I'm always going to be very explicit about like which tools we're using and how we will be using them. So I don't want you to think that you have to make certain assumptions about that, because I think that it's very important to be clear, direct, and very precise in what I ask you to do. And if there's ever a question, because I mean maybe I overlooked something or maybe something's not clear, all you got to do is shoot me an email or come to my office hours, and then we can hash that out. Because if you have a question, it could be a question other folks in the class are having as well. Maybe they're just like either being silent or they're too busy to ask. And so you might actually be doing people a favor, because like if you ask me that, and I think it's something that could be affecting others, I'm going to broadcast it out and try to correct and make sure everybody's on the same page with what's going on, probably announcing it on Open Lab or sending an email to the class. So we will be using a lot of tools. So I don't want you to be frustrated by that. I just want you to think about that in terms of how this is just common workplace practice. And it's good to be able to dynamically shift and reimagine how you can use different tools for different purposes. Because as I've said I think maybe in the first lecture, but if not, I'll say it again, and I probably will say it again during the semester. One of the key quotes I like from science fiction and literature comes to us from William Gibson. William Gibson, he's American-born writer, has lived in Canada for a number of years, but many years ago he coined the term cyberspace. So before he wrote that word down in a July 1982 story that appeared in Omni magazine called Burning Chrome, the word cyberspace did not exist. And then he defined the word in his 1984 novel Neuromancer. And this is the book that, this is an apocryphal story. Apocryphal meaning like, we're not really sure if it's true or not, but it has like a hint of truth about it. But the idea that once that book came out in 1984, it launched 1,000 research projects on virtual reality, because in that book, Gibson kind of encapsulated the idea of what virtual reality might be like, and this was the idea of cyberspace. And of course, that word began circulating and being used in like newspaper articles and magazines and books and in classes, in movies, and it just went everywhere. Though, just as an aside, one of the interesting things about that is that when Gibson imagined that word cyberspace and wrote about it in his books, he had never used a computer before. He had never touched a computer before. When he wrote that, he was actually using an almost 100-year-old typewriter to write those words. The typewriter is a very old type of typewriter, which is interesting because you imagine William Gibson, he's like smoking cigarettes as he's writing, typing on this clunky mechanical keyboard typewriter. The keys on the typewriter are made out of celluloid. If you're not familiar, before they were like plastics, like we know them today, celluloid was kind of like a proto-plastic, petroleum-based product, but highly flammable. Celluloid is what they used to make film reels out of that would be projected in the movie theater. That was celluloid. It's very flammable. And so like when those machines, the projectors they use at movie theaters had to have cooling systems to make sure that the film didn't get too hot, because you're shining this very bright light through it. Because if it got too hot, it would catch on fire. Well, the keys on this keyboard were made out of celluloid. So as he's like smoking, and if he accidentally dropped some ash on a key, it would actually set fire. So we're talking about someone who doesn't know about computers, who isn't using them to write this story about cyberspace, actually comes up with this vision of what it would be like. And many people have been inspired by these stories. Well, I say all that as preface to this quote that he uses in a lot of his fiction. It appears in a lot of his stories and books. And it's simply, the street finds its own use for things. The street finds its own use for things. Now, in a general sense, what Gibson's talking about is that, even though something may be built for one purpose, people figure out other uses for a piece of technology, an object of technology. So you can imagine, like if you're a fan of the Christopher Nolan Batman films, with the Dark Knight, the Joker is a good example. On the one hand, you're talking about like a pencil as being like a writing implement, and then we see the Joker like use it as like a deadly weapon, right? Same is true of like a hammer. A hammer can be used both for hammering nails. It can be used for deconstructing things, tearing things apart. It can be a paperweight. It can be a doorstop. You could use it to prop something up. So you can find other uses for things. But what's important for you guys as whether it be like in the profession of technical writing or doing technical writing in your work, or even in the actual work that you're training to do in computer systems, electrical engineering, etc., is that you want to look around at what you have on hand. What things can you repurpose? What things can you imagine a new way of using to improve your workflow or to develop a more efficient workflow. This is something that even in a conversation I had with my uncle over email just the other day, he's a tinkerer. He likes to build different types of machines. He actually built his own some of his machinery in his machine shop totally from scratch. I mean, he would literally cast the parts out of metal using his own forge, building molds, and casting the different parts in which to build the final mechanism. Well, for him, he was wanting to do some sort of gear reduction, and instead of like buying a 3-phase adjustable RPM motor, which he said would cost him like $400, the one that he needed, he remembered that this other machine that he built had this complex gearing mechanism, which he could bring over to the machine that he was working on and do all the gear reductions inside this other machine. So the idea is like use what you have on hand, and not only like in terms of yourself, it can save you money if like it's your own work, but think about yourself in the workplace where you might be an employee of a company. And one of the things to keep in mind is that, from the company's perspective, they're wanting to see like what value you add to that company. And so if you can find efficiencies, if you can find better ways of doing things, and be able to explain how like this new workflow you've developed or how you've repurposed this tool is going to help save like 5%, 10%, 20% of effort, then you're going to be able to show how you're adding value to that company. Those are the types of things that keep you employed. Those are the types of things that can help you get promoted. So it's something that, from a practical standpoint, just for your own sanity, your own work to make things easier for yourself, but also how can you be adding that value to the company that you work for, or maybe the company that you own, like if you're an entrepreneur. Very important lessons that you guys should be thinking about, like as you look forward into the future for your careers. Because these are the types of things that can give you that fulfilling and very successful career that you're all looking for, I imagine. So, Street finds its own use for things, and that's kind of like at the heart of our class and why we're going to be using different communication tools for different things. So in what I'm getting around to is that for our second, let's see, if we think about our first weekly writing project, you sent me an email. The second weekly writing project or assignment, I had you guys post your writing as a comment to a post that I wrote on our Open Lab site. This week, what I'm going to be having you use is email. And you're going to be attaching your work as emails both to me as well as a small group of students I assign. So you're going to be making use of the reply all function in your student email. And you're also going to be attaching your work as Word doc or docx files that make it easy for people to download your work, be able to read it, and then comment back to you with some suggestions. Well, I'm thinking about it, we might not even worry about doing email attachments at this point. Certainly you can, but I'll give you the option also of just copy and pasting your writing into the email, which may make it easier for some of your fellow students to read your work, because I know everybody's accessibility online can be problematic. You may have problems with your computer, problems with software, problems with connectivity. So let's try to make things work as easy as possible for all of us, right? So I'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to this week's weekly writing assignment. Just want to give you guys a quick reminder on our Open Lab site. Remember, the syllabus link over here on the left-hand side is where everything about the class that we're doing and is coming up is laid out in detail. So if you have any questions about, refer to the syllabus, and then if something is still not crystal clear, shoot me an email or come by the office hours and we'll talk about it. All right, so we got syllabus, and then just to click on it, let's scroll down and look at the schedule. Here we are, week 3. What we're going to be working on, let's see, is circulate 500-word summary draft and solicit feedback. That's where I'm going to be setting you guys the task. And then do last week's weekly writing assignment, which you guys are turning in right now, which is doing that reverse outline. Excellent work I've seen so far on that. If you have any questions about that, make sure you reach out to me. Not a big deal, because I want to make sure everybody understands both what we're doing and also why we're doing it. You keep in mind with a reverse outline, it helps us break down what's going on in a particular essay that someone else wrote, but it's also, you go into depth, I think, last week's lecture about this, but it's actually really useful for ourselves. Like if we've written something and we're getting feedback that something isn't working right, to write a reverse outline of our own writing will help us see maybe organizational issues that we can resolve more easily once we've broken down what is the main idea in each paragraph. So reverse outlines are a really excellent writing tool that you guys ought to know about now. And then we'll have the lecture, which I'm recording right now. I'm going to post it so you guys can begin watching it tomorrow, Wednesday. So just looking ahead, week 4, September 16th, September 23rd, the final draft of your 500-word summary is going to be due. And like I said in our very first lecture, what we're always aiming toward is the last date, the end of the week, is when something will come actually due. So I'm trying to give like a large window where everybody can do their best work, essentially. I want to give everybody that space to show me the best of what you're capable of. And so what you do in this week, for week 3, is going to filter down into what you accomplish for week 4 as you finalize your 500-word summary. And I'll give you directions on how you'll turn that in, which is going to be written as a post to our Open Lab site. So it'll be the first thing that you're going to be posting to our site. All right, as we do that, that's some other stuff. We'll talk about that next week. But just to kind of give you a sense of where we're going, and then also next week I'll introduce the next major project, which will be the 750-word expanded definition, which is going to require more research than what you did this project, because you'll have to be looking in multiple sources available through the library to write your expanded definition. But we'll get to that next week. All right, so that's everything going on with Open Lab. And so I want to talk just a little bit about research, make sure everybody knows how to find that stuff, and also about the Purdue OWL website. Things I know I've gone over before, but I think it pays sometimes to repeat things to help people remember and also help people find these resources. So for this assignment, this major project you're working on, the 500-word summary, again, you're choosing one article that you find through the library's databases that's related to something important to you and your future career. So it probably ought to be something like you're studying, right? Or something that involves the work you're going to do once you graduate from City Tech. You find that one article and you're going to summarize it in 500 words. And remember, as I mentioned before, there's a window we're looking at, because in the workplace, sometimes you're going to be given guidelines where they may say, we need you to write like this blurb that'll go in an instruction manual for this product that you helped develop. But you only have 500 words, or you only have 1,000 words. It can't be any longer than that. And it can't be any shorter than that, because, that's the space that we've bracketed out in like a manual or brochure or poster, whatever it might be, where your words will go. And so if you give them too few words, well, it's going to look like, very empty. If you give too many words, then they're not able to fit it all in. So when we talk about word count, it's not something necessarily arbitrary. In the workplace, there's real reasons why we have word counts and why we have to adhere to them. So in this case, the overall assignment is a 500-word summary. That's basically 2 pages, double space worth of writing. Well, I wanted to give you a window because it's obviously it's very hard to try to hit that exact 500 words. It's obviously can be done, but I don't think that's absolutely necessary because real workplace practice, plus or minus a few words, is what you want to aim for. So in this case, I gave you a window of 475 words as a minimum and 525 words as a maximum. And that's all inclusive of your document. So your whole document, and I'll zip over here to Microsoft Word, is going to include your memo bracket at the top, to, from, date, subject. Memorize that. You need to know that. It's going to include all of your writing. Now again, this is taken from your reverse outline. Your final 500-word summary won't look like this, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's imagine those numbers aren't there. And then at the bottom, you'll have reference, and then underneath that, you'll have your APA formatted bibliographic reference for the article that you found. And like here's an article that I found from Science Fiction Studies. And I pulled this from Academic Search Complete, and you can see that they did not format the title right. Only the first letter of the title and proper words should be capitalized. So like first word of the title of this article is remediated, so that's capitalized. Then little case readers, gender, and literacy in. But here we have a person's name, a proper noun, so capital N Neil, capital S Stevenson, and then this is the title of the book that they're talking about, The Diamond Age. So that would be capital T, the, capital D, Diamond, capital A, Age, and it's a book title, so it should also be italicized. Science Fiction Studies, volume, issue number, page numbers, and then the link to the resource. And here I'm getting rid of that proxy information. Remember I talked about that in the previous lecture. Proxy is what allows you to get access from home, but it only helps you. If you give that link to someone who doesn't you go to school at City Tech, they're going to be like, what the hell? I can't access this. So make sure you get rid of that proxy stuff. So it's just doi.org/whatever for the rest of the URL, and you're golden. All right, so this full thing, imagine, is going to be about 2 pages double spaced. And if you're using Microsoft Word, you always have this word count over here in the lower left-hand corner. And if you're using other word processors from one of the tools built in, you can find out how many words are in the document. Same is true for Google Docs. It also has a word count feature. So any of those are totally fine. Use whatever word processor works for you. Again, the street finds its own use for things. So make use of what works for you, what you have access to get that done. All right, so that's that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the library, and then we're going to get into this week's weekly writing assignment. So I do want you guys to memorize the URL to our library. It's very easy. Don't rely on a Google search. So many students I see in the classroom will just type in like City Tech into Google. Like they might not even type in the full URL of citytech.cuny.edu. It involves like so many more steps and takes so much more time than if you just type in these URLs by memory. So in this case, the URL I want you to memorize is library.citytech.cuny.edu. Just type that into the address bar of whatever browser you use. Bam, you're at the City Tech Library's website. So for all this research that we're doing for this first assignment, I'm going to show you other things you can find through the library for the 750-word expanded definition. But for right now, all we're interested in are articles. So once you land at library.citytech.cuny.edu, just scroll down, and over here on the left in this box that says Start Your Research, just click on this link, Find Articles. So on the Find Articles page, the quickest way to get to where the databases are, aggregations of different journal articles published by all the different journals in the world. They're owned by different companies. Different companies, make contracts with different journal publishers to provide access to them electronically. And each of these different aggregators of journal articles charge a lot of money for access to these holdings. And they're able to custom tailor like what kind of access we get at City Tech. What you'll find is like some of the journals that we have access to, we may not have the full historical run. We may not be able to access maybe the last year's worth of a journal or the last 5 years worth. And the reason for this is that different tiers, TIERS, tiers of access, levels of access, cost different amounts of money. And so our librarians at City Tech, they're given a budget and they work tirelessly to find like the right combinations of access with what monies we have available to help you gain more knowledge through this cutting edge research that goes into journals. One thing that I didn't mention in my last lecture about journals and why they're so important, I mean, especially for you guys, because many of you guys are about to graduate. So this is like your last chance to have, essentially free access to this knowledge. Because once you're out of here, I mean, you could pay for access, but you would never, unless you're like Bill Gates or Elon Musk or somebody like that, you're not going to be able to pay for access to all these kinds of journals that we have access to at City Tech. So while you're still a student here, I would really, really recommend that you spend some time on your own, totally outside of the class. I know this is like a radical, crazy-ass idea that I'm trying to sell to you guys, but it's something that I did myself, and I think it helped me out. And so I think it would benefit you as well, is to dig through these databases for articles of cutting-edge knowledge that might be beneficial to you, that might be useful to you later on. So like even if you don't have time to read it now, go ahead and find some of these articles, download them, save them to a flash drive or somewhere on your computer, and remember they're there so you can return to them when you have some free time to learn something new, because anything new that you learn is going to help distinguish you a little bit more. It might help you on a job interview. It might help you when you're like, having a conversation with someone like you at a job fair, trade conference, any of these types of things that you're likely to go to and interact with others in your field, is that you want to be able to talk shop. And why journals are so important to that is that's where new knowledge is created. So like take, for example, a class where you may have had like a textbook. Well, if you can imagine that textbook, even if it were like published in 2020, okay, that book likely took maybe 3 to 5 years to write, okay? And even with that 3 to 5 years to write, there's a lag time between when it's finalized and when it's actually published. So some of that knowledge that you're getting in that textbook may be 5 years old. If it's an older textbook that hasn't got a new edition, that knowledge might be 10 years old, 20 years old. So the thing is, in the journals, that's where everything new is happening. That's the cutting edge. The things that go into the journals eventually filter their way into textbooks, filter their way into, say, magazine articles, news articles. I mean, you probably see like on CNN and other news places, they'll say there's a new report that says this food is bad for you or this food is good for you. What they call reports are usually journal articles that their specialists, say like a medical specialist or a medical journalist finds, because they also have access to these types of databases through their work because they need it for doing their research. They stumble onto these things and then share it by summarizing the technical data in those articles for a general reading audience. Those journalists are doing exactly what I'm asking you to do with this type of summary assignment. You're taking like very complex data that you needs to have 5 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages to explain, and you're consolidating it into something much shorter, 500 words, so that someone can just read that summary and get the gist of what that particular article is about. What are the main points? What are the highlights in that article that you found? Okay, so that's my argument about databases. Very useful to you, cutting edge research. And I've mentioned before, these are by and large peer-reviewed sources, meaning that specialists in the field evaluate the knowledge that appears in them. So they're not just anybody can publish in these journals. I mean, you have to have the specialized knowledge that enables you to do the research that's required to pass muster with these gatekeepers, with these peer reviewers. All right, so the first database I mentioned before, probably the easiest for everybody to find something, is under the A's, and it's Academic Search Complete, EBSCO, right here. And what's cool about Academic Search Complete, and I don't want to say it's the end-all be-all because you're not going to find everything there. Again, once you click on it, you should get this login. Make sure you use your CUNY First login. The cool thing about Academic Search Complete, though, is that it easily gives you APA citations for your references section of your work. So if I were to type in what I was looking for earlier before I started recording was science fiction and cyberpunk. William Gibson is one of the cyberpunks. Why don't I also let me add him in. And William Gibson. Okay. Let me limit this to full text. Science Fiction Studies. This is a major journal in the science fiction field. So I'm going to click on that. Post-National Cool, William Gibson's Japan. And so on this page here, it gives me all the details about that article, who wrote it, what journal it appeared in, the date, volume, issue, page numbers. But over here on the right, let me scroll up a little bit so my talking head's not in the way, and we click on Cite. And we just scroll down, and we have APA. And you see everything is correct in this, except like I mentioned before, is they don't get those other words lowercase. So post-national, that should be capital P, capital N, I guess, because this is an adjective. But then cool would be lowercase, William and Gibson would be uppercase because that's his name, and Japan would be uppercase because that's a proper noun of place, Japan, the country. And then everything else looks right. Got a title, volume, issue, page numbers, and then the link. And again, just get rid of this stuff right here and change that dash to a dot. doi.org/10.5621/scienficstud.3830478. Cool. So the site feature is really useful with Academic Search Complete. But as I mentioned before, there's other ones that I've mentioned. For some folks, IEEE Explore under I might be useful. But with its search, I'm blanking now in my head if it has a site feature, but I'm going to show you guys how to get all that information anyways. I mentioned S. We got Science Direct, has a lot of stuff. Did I jot down some of the others in this notebook? Then we also have Applied Science and Tech Source, that's under the A's. Springer Link eJournals, just a little bit further down this page under S's. And then Wiley Online under W. So, I mean, all these are good places that you can find sources, and with varying degrees of automatic citation building. But let's say one of those databases doesn't give you your citation building. All you got to do, open a new tab while you got your library site open, and go to Google. And this is a case where you don't have to memorize the URL. Just type in these search terms. Memorize this: Purdue OWL APA. Okay, Purdue OWL APA, and then hit enter. This very first link is where we want to go, APA style. As I mentioned before, this has all the information you ever need to know about APA for our class. Everything you should need to know is on this site. Now, for doing your references, for the reference section that's at the very bottom of your 500 word summary is a reference list. And if you look here on the menu on the left, we have APA formatting style guide, general format. We're going to be looking at this a little bit later, the in-text citations, but for right now, let's go down to reference list, articles, and periodicals. A journal is a periodical. If you're not familiar with that term, a periodical is something that's published periodically, meaning to a set schedule over time. So like a newspaper, a periodical, published every day. A magazine, typically published once a month, some published once a week, some are bi-weekly, but that's periodically. And a journal, similarly, may be published monthly, they could be published quarterly. Some are published twice a year, but I mean, it's something published over time to a set period. Period meaning time. Okay, so articles and periodicals. And then here at the very top, you see basic form. And this gives you the basic idea of what it should look like. You got the author, comma, first initial, middle initial if they give it, year in parentheses, the title of the article, the title of the periodical, the journal, comma, we got volume number, then in parentheses, issue number. Then we have the pages that the article appears on, and then you have that doi.org link right there at the end. Okay, so this is the basic format. Basically, what I would suggest you do if you need to use this, you can just copy this, go over into your Word document, and paste it as you type maybe above or below it using the article that you found. You can see, okay, the first thing I need to type is the author's name. So I'll type in McGinnis, comma, E, period. That's everything for the author. Cool. Don't need to worry about multiple authors on this essay. It's different, obviously, for different articles. Then the year, 2013, got that. Title of article, I got my title of the article right there. Title of periodical, notice we got that italicized. So we got science fiction studies. Volume number, notice that's also italicized. We got 40. Issue number, 3, that's not italicized. Then we got pages, so 480 to 495, period. And then we have the DOI link at the very end. Easy as that. So use that as a guide. And they also give you some examples a little bit further down. Article and electronic journal, so it shows you like what an example would look like. And for some of the other assignments we got later on, you can come back to this and see how it should look for a magazine, how it should look for a newspaper, what a review should look like. All these things may come in useful later on. All right, so that brings us to the last part that I wanted to talk about in today's lecture, which is going to be about the third weekly writing assignment. And this is going to be further getting you closer to having a really outstanding knockout 500-word summary for your first individual project. Now, one thing I wanted to point out to you is that you'll find that with the lectures, I'm wanting to leverage my voice, showing you things on the screen, but I tend not to use PowerPoint to anchor the things that I'm trying to say to you, or the things that I want to ask you to do. There's an important reason for that, and it's the same thing that I will be doing in our in-person classes if we met in person. The thing is, when you're in the workplace, and like say a manager is wanting to give you a task to do, by and large, a manager is not going to create a PowerPoint showing you step by step what he expects you to do. Instead, he's going to tell you, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then he's going to expect you to then do X, Y, and Z by some given deadline. What's important for you to do, and I'm sure you're already been developing this, I mean, obviously through your whole life, but now is a time to hone this skill, and that's the skill of listening. And that's why I've said before, and I should remind you every time, is to have paper out while you're listening to this lecture. There are things that I will say that will be important for you to remember. And by jotting them down in your notebook, just like I make my notes before we have class, it's important to use those as a guide for what needs to get done. Now, I do layer this with a post on our Open Lab site giving the highlights of what needs to get done for the weekly writing assignment. But you can imagine the bandwidth whenever I'm speaking is much wider, I think, than what I'm going to invest in terms of time to type up all those instructions on our Open Lab site. Because I think it's important for you as a student and as someone who has a future career in the technology field to be a good listener. And to use tools, whether it be like a notepad that you keep in your pocket, a notepad that you keep in your notebook, or even if you use like a smartphone or a tablet to keep notes that you might type in with like thumb type, or you use like an input pen, so that you're always like on point, so that you're always totally in the game and you're not going to drop the ball. Because one of the things that can be like easily the worst thing that can happen to you is to simply drop the ball on a project or assignment or task that you've been given, not just because it makes you look bad and may hurt the company because you haven't done X, Y, and Z, but as we'll see with today's assignment, the work that you do in one part of like an assemblage, meaning like, if you think of like a linkage, like linkages between different parts, and how those linkages, when one moves, the others move, right? So things are moving together. Now, if one thing breaks, or if one thing doesn't fulfill like its purpose, the whole linkage, all those connections, don't move anymore. And so it's important to make sure that you fulfill your task to help the next stage in that linkage, the next connection in whatever step or stages are required to complete the overall project. And the reason why this is important is not so much like you trying to get something done that's going to help you, but in the workplace, everything is collaborative. So if you don't fulfill something you've been asked to do, that's probably work that is meant to go onto someone else's desk next to help them do something different, which leads to the next part in the process. So when you hold up that linkage, you're stopping other people from getting their work done. And so it's vitally important that you listen so that you're always able to do your part of the puzzle, your gear in the machine, so that everything else keeps moving, so that the puzzle picture gets completed. You don't want to hold up anyone else from doing their work because you haven't done yours. And so that's part of this week's weekly writing assignment. So in large part, there are we could say that there are just two major parts to this week's weekly writing assignment. So the first part, You already have your reverse outline. It probably looks something like this. You got your memo block at the top. You got your numbered paragraphs, for each of the paragraphs that you wrote one sentence about in your own words, describing what that paragraph is trying to say or what it's stating, what it's communicating. And then you got your reference at the end. Okay? So the first step that I want you to do is to take those numbered those numbered sentences which correspond to each paragraph, from the original article. I want you to get rid of those numbers. Okay? So go home. Get rid of the numbers. And then I want you to begin pulling those sentences together into paragraphs. So here you see me bringing all those sentences together, right? So I got everything in a nice, yours will obviously be longer than this, but I wanted to fit everything like on one screen. So we got everything together now as paragraphs. So what we're working towards is a first draft of your 500-word summary. Again, this is the first part of your 2-part weekly writing assignment. So after you've put all those sentences together, that constitutes roughly what your 500-word summary should be. Now you can check your word count. If you're over, you may want to read through all those sentences and see which are like maybe the most important. Maybe there's like some sentences you can cut out, or maybe there's some sentences you can consolidate. You can put them together and get rid of some of like the more extraneous words that aren't really useful. Because what we want to aim toward is concision in our writing when we're talking about workplace and technical writing. We want the writing to be direct, always on point. We don't want it to have a lot of empty language or empty words that don't really help with our meaning or understanding of what's trying to be communicated. So try to get that reverse outline into shape so that you're well within your 500 words for the 500-word summary. Now, it's okay at this point because this is a draft if it's under or if it's really over. Okay, I don't want you to be tearing your hair out at this point on that, because we're still time through revision to get this thing into shape. But after you've got the main part of your summary roughly the way you would like it to look at this stage, I need you to go add a line between your memo header and your reverse outline summary of the article, and you need to write one sentence at least. I would just say one sentence. One sentence, or I'll put this into complete sentence. Write one sentence stating the purpose of this memo. So you could say something like, this memo is a 500-word summary of the article by some author. A computer scientist at IBM, an electrical engineer at Georgia Tech, right? So what I've done here with this example right here is say that this memo is a 500-word summary of the article, comma, and you notice I put into quotation marks the title of the article that I'm writing my summary about. So just write the title exactly how it appears in the article, But notice that I'm not doing APA's bibliographic capitalization. We're writing inside the actual body of your memo. So we want to use proper capitalization of the title. So here we're going to go capital W, capital T, lowercase o and of because that's a preposition, and then capital A. So each word that's not like a preposition or a conjunction should have the first letter capitalized. Then you notice I give a comma and then close quotation marks, space. Then I say by and I give the author's name. And if you really want to knock it out of the park, say something about who this person is or persons, comma, a noted computer scientist, or you could say a computer scientist at wherever that person works or teaches, an electrical engineer at Georgia Tech. If you have a whole bunch of authors for your article, you might not need to give this extra explanation, because then you can imagine you're going to have like 2 pages worth of descriptions of who these people are. If you're lucky, maybe they all work at the same place. You could say, comma, researchers, plural, at IBM or Microsoft or wherever it might be. So this one sentence at the very beginning is like its own paragraph. See, I'm going to skip a space. So this will be your memo's statement of purpose. This, however long it is going to be your summary. Let's skip a space. We got the word reference. If we want to do this right, we can even center the word reference, and then after that, with our hanging indent, we're going to have our bibliographic entry that you've already written for this last week's weekly writing assignment. So that part's already done. All right, so we're almost there. So there is one last thing I want you to do for this first part of this week's weekly writing assignment. So you got this really great reverse outline developed summary, right? Well, what I want you to do is return to the article, though, and I want you to find one quote that can fit into this summary to maybe elaborate on or support, something that you've said in your reverse outline built summary. So, for example, like if I were to turn over to so this is the article I was looking at earlier. It's logged me out. Not a big deal. You'll probably encounter similar problems. All right, we got this article here. Okay, I'm going to PDF full text. All right, now we got the article up. I'm looking at it and just looking through something that this author says himself, not something that he's quoting from somebody else. You can see here, like, he's mentioning like theorists like J. David Bolter and Richard Gruson, and Bolter and Gruson's theory of remediation. That's cool, but here this author is actually just quoting somebody else. I want to find something that this author himself says. So, for example, here in the third paragraph, in this essay, comma, I meaning this author, I argue the Diamond Age remediates not only a particular technology, but also a larger American cultural narrative about literacy. that's a really great sentence that I can quote in my summary. Because I can say, like maybe I have my first sentence that says roughly what the essay is about, and then I can say, McGinnis argues, comma, quote, and then I want to paste just text. I don't want any formatting. Okay, because I'm saying McGinnis argues, I don't need this stuff. In this essay, I argue. That's unnecessary. McGinnis argues that the diamond age, that should be italicized. Extra space, got rid of that. Oh, there's a bunch of extra spaces here. Got to get rid of those. Got to fix up any text that you may just copy and paste over for a quote. Okay, see all these extra spaces? I'm getting rid of those. Probably just should have typed it in myself, right? All right, so end quote, space, and then you notice I have a period there. All right, so this is where we're going to go back to the Purdue OWL website, because what we need to do now, whereas last week with this reference here at the bottom, that was a bibliographic reference that you added for the entire article. What we're going to do now, because we've added a quote from that article in text, meaning that it's in the body of our summary, in the body of what we're writing, we need to do what's called an in-text, in-text citation. So we're going to zip back over to Firefox. I got my Purdue OWL website open. I'm going to look over here in the menu on the left, in-text, right here at the top. In-text citations, the basics. That's all we need. I'm going to scroll down. Here you can read through this. This gives you some ideas. But here, this is third paragraph tells us exactly what we need to know. We need the author's last name, comma, space, the year that the source was published, comma, space, P period for page, space, and then the page number that the quote came from. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that. Why not? Copy. Go back over to Word. And you see, just make sure that you can see where I'm at. I'm looking at the quote that I added to my summary. I gave a little bit of introduction in my own words. I'm saying the author argues, comma, the stuff. And then I'm just going to paste what I got from Purdue OWL APA. But obviously, I don't want it to say Jones. I said it's McGinnis. So let's take McGinnis and replace Jones. Now, this article wasn't published in 1998. When was it published? 2013. So let's change that. 2013. And then I don't know what page it was on, so I'm going to zip back over to Firefox. Go back to that article. And I'm just going to scroll the page, and I can see the top corner, page 480. So I'm going to change that 199 to 480. Close parenthesis, period, space, and then I just continue on with my next sentence. So for this 500-word summary draft, I want to see you add one quote. The quote needs to have a little bit of introduction in your own words, which means like you can say things like according to, and give the author's name, comma, give the quote. You could say the author's last name states, comma, and then give the quote. You can give the author's last name and then say, like, so in this case, McGinnis shows that, and then give the quote. I mean, there's a lot of other ways, but like if you haven't done this before, don't have a lot of experience with it, use something very simple where you're just saying who it is that's speaking, meaning McGinnis, or who's writing, and like, what it is they're doing. In this case, he's arguing. He's trying to prove this. Is he stating a point of fact? Is he saying something like, say, it's like an interview, but give like some kind of introduction in your own words to begin the sentence of the quote. Don't do what I call a naked quote. That's where you just take the full quote, put it in quotation marks, and stick it between two of your sentences. Some writers do that, but I think it breaks up the flow of your writing. You need to have some words that help the reader understand where this is coming from. And by giving a little bit of introduction to your quote that you choose, helps your reader out. And in technical communication, that's exactly what we do, which is help our readers through our communication. Okay, so this is the first part of the weekly writing assignment that I want you to complete, which is you're going to turn your reverse outline into what looks more like a summary, turn it all into paragraphs, get rid of those numbers for each paragraph. You're going to add one sentence that is stating the purpose of the memo, and the purpose is just simply to summarize the article. That's all you're doing. Don't say it's part of a class. Don't say that I told you to do it. That while that's something understood because you were in a class and doing that, but because this might be something you'll want to include in your own portfolio one day, let's keep this professional. State the fact of like, what its main purpose is, which is simply just to summarize with a certain word count an article. Add one quote from your article. Make sure you give an in-text citation, just like I just showed you. Just refer back to the Purdue OWL, OWL, meaning the online writing lab, the Purdue OWL, and then APA website. And then you already got your reference here at the bottom. I'm going to get rid of this extra guy that I added. We don't need that. But this right here, yours is going to be like basically 2 pages long, but this gives you an idea of what your draft should look like after you've completed the first part of this week's weekly writing assignment. To, from, date, subject, 1 sentence, purpose, the summary, and then your reference at the bottom. And make sure you remember that quote and give that in-text citation. Okay? All right, so that's the first part. Now I want you to take care of this as quickly as you can. Okay? The reason being, like I said before, is sometimes other people's work relies on you getting your work done. For this week's weekly writing assignment, the second part is to do peer review of your draft. And this is what I propose to do. I got everybody's email addresses now. They're City Tech official email addresses on our Open Lab site. And what I'm going to do is build small groups. And what I'm going to do is send an email to everybody in the group to essentially create a peer review team, just like we would do if we were meeting in class. But of course, we're not meeting in class. We're meeting asynchronously online in this virtual environment. So we can leverage email as a way to get this work done, which is to send your draft, like we see here on the screen, to your peer review team members. Once they receive your work, I want them to read it, and this serves a purpose in and of itself. Research shows that by reading the writing of other students actually helps you become a better writer because it introduces you to other ways of writing, more ways of writing than I can show you myself, because I have my own style for different circumstances, for different audiences. But when we're talking about, like, we have 26 folks in our class. So it's a lot of different voices, a lot of different backgrounds, and all of them are equally valuable and offer a lot of insight into different ways of communicating. And so you can learn something from everybody in the class and the way that they write as well. So by reading it, you're gaining some insight into other ways of writing. But to be beneficial to the person who sent you their essay, we need to give them some constructive feedback. Constructive meaning is that we're not going to be rude, we're not going to be tearing each other apart, but we are going to be giving people ideas about like what works, what doesn't work, and some suggestions that might make their writing stronger. Okay? So this is what I would like you all to do. So you finish your draft, and then in your email, just to kind of show everybody this, so here I am in my faculty email, which should look very similar to what your email looks like. And so you're going to receive an email from me. And so I'm just using this email, one of my department emails from the school as an example. You're going to receive this email, and you're going to see up here at the top that it's going to be from me, but it's going to be carbon copied, meaning it's also going to be sent to all of you that are going to constitute the team. So once you've completed your draft, what I need you to do is not click reply, okay? I do want to see your writing, but I want everybody in your team to also see your writing. So make sure that you click that little down arrow over here on the right, next to reply, and choose reply all. Do you see that up here at the top? Reply all. And you're going to see up here everybody's name that's in your team. You're going to see me, and you'll see all of your teammates. And the reason why we're doing this is that I want to be able to see that you're doing this writing, so I can give you credit for doing the weekly writing assignment. But for your teammates, they need to receive your writing so they can read it, and then they're going to reply back with their feedback. And again, when you reply back after you've read someone's work and you're ready to write an email to them with your feedback, I want you to again reply all. So that way I can see that you have replied with some feedback. And of course, it also will be beneficial, I think, to the other team members to kind of see what other people are saying. Because like if someone else, like you see, said like, one thing could be corrected, you might want to say something else, right? That way you're not like just like you're repeating the same stuff over and over. So I think it'd be useful to everybody to see what everybody else is saying. So this is one of the powerful things of the reply all function of email. Now, we might talk later in the semester like how reply all can be a very dangerous thing in another circumstance, where especially like a company-wide email. But like these emails that we're going to be sending for our peer review are going to be tightly constrained, right? Because I will be the person sending the first email, and I'm only going to include those of you that are in that particular peer review team. All right. Now, because we have 26 students, I'm going to have to randomly assign everyone. So I don't want everybody to be like overburdened by this. So there will, unfortunately for this, be some teams that like have one extra person that the others don't have. In which case that for those teams, that's going to be a little bit extra work, but you'll keep track of this so that when we do this again in the future, this gets mixed up again. Because I don't want the work over the whole semester to be too onerous for anyone. All right, so we'll be doing that. So again, reply all with your draft of your 500-word summary after you've tidied it up, and then reply all with your feedback. Now, earlier I'd said I would like you to attach your writing as a Word docx file. I think just because we're just doing peer review and we're just trying to look at each other's writing without like spending a lot of time looking at like how it's being crafted, or also to create like hurdles for people to open Word doc files, I would like you just to copy and paste your writing into the email. So here I am, Microsoft Word. I have my draft. I'm just going to copy everything. Go back over to email. So here's this email. I'm going to click the down arrow. I'm going to click reply all so that it goes to me, Professor Ellis, and then to everybody in your team. You might start by typing something like, "Hi all, thank you in advance for reading my summary and giving me feedback." You should always write some sort of like statement of your humanity. Be nice to people. Be kind. If someone's doing you a favor, acknowledge it. So in this case, you're just saying like, thanks in advance for doing this favor for me, which they're doing you a favor by giving you some peer review feedback. Right? Then just hit return a couple of times, and then just paste your writing beneath that. And then that way, your teammates, all they got to do is open your email, and they'll be able to read everything. They're going to be able to see your memo header. They're going to see your statement of purpose for the memo. They're going to see your summary, including that quote that you included somewhere. It can be anywhere inside that the summary you write, with the in-text citation, and then they're going to see that reference there at the very bottom. So everything will be there. Now, that's how we're getting the document circulated. But now, after you've received someone's summary, what I want you to do is, again, click that down arrow on the right, reply all, and then make sure, like, whenever you begin this, address it to who you're actually writing the feedback for. So look at their name. It's going to take me a while to remember everyone's names. I'm going to choose Albert, okay? Sorry to put you on the spot there, Albert. Hi, Albert. Here is my feedback for your 500-word summary. So I give a salutation to the person, even though I'm replying all. So everybody in your little team is going to see it, and I will see it as well. So I'll know that you're doing the work. Hi, Albert, addressed to who you're giving feedback to, because you'll want to, when you reply all, do it individually, like for each essay. Don't just do one super feedback email. That I know that will lower the number of emails that are circulating, but it could be harder for someone to be able to define their particular feedback that you sent them. Okay? So send an individual email to everyone, reply all for each of the essays that you read. And that way you can also give replies as you receive these emails, because not everybody is going to finish this and circulate their essay at the exact same moment. But I would encourage you all to do that as soon as you can, so people can begin reading and begin giving you feedback as quickly as possible. So here, you're going to say, here's my feedback for your 500-word summary. So after you've read it, what I'd like you to do, and again, this needs to be polite and constructive. Like, no tearing anybody apart. No, being rude about any of this, please. Because, we're all human beings, and it's important to, acknowledge that with the kind of feedback that we give. So in your feedback, I'd like you to say at least one sentence about something that you liked in the summary. It could be like the words that they use. It could be the way they write their sentences. It could be the fact that they used APA really well. I don't know. Find something that you find affirming, positive about the writing to begin with, and say what that is. Then find at least one thing that you think needs correcting. And when I am focusing on this, I don't want you to think about the APA stuff yet, but look at something that needs correcting in terms of grammar. It could be syntax. When I say syntax, that means like the punctuation they use, commas, periods, spacing, etc. Their word choice or diction. It's like are they using the same word over and over again, or do they need to add some adjectives, or is there? You could also think about grammatical things like verb tense or number. So anything that you think doesn't look right, and then give them a suggestion like about how to fix it. So if you find a sentence where maybe they did all the verb tenses incorrectly, well, just say you can say in your sentence, one of the problems I found in your summary was some of the sentences have incorrect verb tenses. And then you can just copy a sentence from their summary. So you go down to where their summary is, copy that sentence, and then say, for example, comma, quote, paste their sentence in there, and then correct it. Show them the right way that it should be. You only have to do one example, okay? I'm not asking everybody to do a lot here. So one thing that you like, that's good, one thing that needs fixing, and maybe give them an idea about how to fix it. And then finally, let them know if the APA citation stuff looks right, which means that they should have one quote with an in-text citation in the body of their summary, and there should be an APA formatted reference at the end of the essay. And of course, like that in-text citation for the quote, the name of that author better match the reference at the end of their summary, right? Because they need to link up. There's one thing is pointing to the next. That in-text citation is pointing to the full bibliographic information at the end of their summary. And then once you've typed that up, just say best or cheers, and then give your name and send it off. So for all of these emails, for this weekly assignment, make sure you keep in your mind, reply all. You don't want to reply all in all circumstances, but in this week's assignment, reply all. That way, everything that you're sending out is seen by me and everybody in your team. Now, these emails, I'll start sending them out Wednesday afternoon, okay? So when I'm having my office hours, I'll also be sitting there formatting these emails, picking out everyone's email addresses for each team randomly. I'll probably use random.org to generate the numbers. That way it keeps it completely random. And I'll send those out. So be watching for that. All right, so those are the two parts for this week's weekly writing assignment. So one, fix up your reverse outline into a first draft of the 500-word summary. You give that sentence of purpose for the memo, add a quote, give an in-text citation, and then, of course, massage the text as much as possible to get inside that 475 to 525 window for your assignment. Then, reply all to that email that I send you for the peer review groups. Thank everybody for helping you, and then paste your copy and paste your draft of your 500-word summary into that email and send it off. And then wait for others in your team to send you their work. So make sure you're checking your email once a day to look for those things. And then once you receive it, read it, and then you're going to shoot back to everybody, reply all to everybody in the email group that you're in with something that's affirmative that you like, something that needs fixing, and you give some suggestions about how to fix it, and then 3, confirm if they got their APA stuff right. Now with the APA stuff, you don't have to necessarily fix it unless you want to, but you probably see some that are wrong or that you think may not be exactly right. And you can tell them, hey, you need to look back at Purdue Owl APA website to fix that. Okay? I know I'm giving you a lot of stuff in this 1 week, but try to get as much of it done as you can. If it bleeds over into the next week, that's okay. We'll still be on track, I think, to have you guys finish your final draft of the assignment. But you want to try to aim to get as much of this done this week as you can. And again, keep in mind how your work and how fast you get this draft done and sent out is going to help others do their work. And the same is true for like you giving feedback to others. Because if someone's waiting for your feedback, they're not going to be able to use it for next week's weekly writing assignment, which is to use that feedback to help them revise their work for their final draft of the 500-word summary that you'll be posting on OpenLab that I will grade. So you see, all this stuff is leading up to this big assignment. And these things that we're practicing, peer review, this is part of collaborative writing that you will likely see also in the workplace. Because very rarely when you're working on writing that may be public-facing or client-facing, will it be written by a single person from their voice. It'll be something written collaboratively by lots of different stakeholders. And so this kind of work, peer review and collaborative writing that you'll be doing on future assignments, dovetail very tightly into the kinds of writing that you're going to find yourself having to do in the workplace as you know, either a technical writer or someone who's doing technical writing tasks. Okay? So again, this isn't busy work. This is all building into the kinds of things that you're going to be seeing later on. I think that's everything for this week, so I'm going to end the lecture here so that you have plenty of time to try to get to spend the rest of our class time doing this work, just like we're having studio time in person. And I guess one thing that you should keep in mind about our class, I didn't mention before, but this is true in general of any class, and you should keep this in mind, is like for whatever credit class you're taking, you're kind of expected to be spending twice as much of that time outside of class on homework, readings, and other types of work relating to it. So like our class is a 3 credit hour class. So that means in class per week we're spending 3 hours. And for us, that includes part of it's lecture, and then part of it is that studio time where you're actually working on these assignments. And then, of course, I'm available to like respond to email or with my office hours to help you individually on whatever questions you might have about them. But then there's that extra time where you're doing the actual homework assignments, which is the weekly writing assignment. In this case, you're revising your work to make a first draft and then doing the peer review work. So this is something I know it's impractical to expect you to be able to do that much time on this one class every single week, but it is something that over time should average out, because you'll find with like the major projects, you'll likely have to spend a lot more time outside of those 3 normal hours of our class doing the work, because you'll be working with others collaboratively to do some really big projects involving research, and then of course also doing the public speaking and developing the website, etc. for those things. So again, all this stuff is leading up to bigger and more involved projects, but all of it is mirroring workplace practices that you either have already encountered or that you will expect to encounter once you're in your career. Okay? So again, be safe, stay healthy, make sure that you're wearing a mask when you go out, make sure like when you're wearing your mask that you're actually covering your whole face, including your nose. My God, today I had to take the subway to Manhattan for an appointment. I was really surprised by folks that were in an enclosed space that didn't quite understand why we need to be wearing masks, which is obviously not just to protect ourselves, but to protect others around us, especially in closed spaces. So make sure you're wearing your mask right to protect yourself and others, because, this virus spreads very easily, and even though you might not be affected that badly by it if you were to catch it, it could wind up affecting someone very, very badly. I know people firsthand that got it and got over the virus from it like being communicable, but they're going through months of rehab now. I know people like on my block that died from this thing. So please take care of yourself and also take care of others. That's very important. And also, I want to wish you good luck in like all your other classwork, your jobs, your life, and everything else. Okay, we're all in this together. We're going to get through it. Make sure you remember that Wednesday 3 to 5 I have my office hours. I'll post the link on OpenLab. And then if you also have any questions about anything, reach out to me by email if you can't make the office hours. So I'll talk to you guys next week if I don't see you before then.